so I'm going to try to give you just a little refresher on what we went over in class with completing the square. I know it was a big lecture and a lot of information to take in, so I just wanted you to have maybe 3 more examples to kind of think through and process at home. So our first one is x squared plus 10x minus 24. So what we want to do, the problem with this trinomial is that it can't be factored. Okay, last chapter when we factored trinomials, we would look for a common factor, then we would go ahead and set up our 2 parentheses, and we would look for 2 numbers that multiplied to give us negative 24, that added to give us 10. Well, there's no 2 numbers that multiply to negative 24 that add to 10. Well, I guess no. Technically there is, but for this example, okay, we will pretend that we don't know what those are. So what we're going to do is we want to make this trinomial a perfect square trinomial. What that means is that my first term is a perfect square and my last term is a perfect square. And that in the middle is twice the product of the outside in the first term. So let me show you what we're going to do. First thing is, let me pick a different color. We are going to add 24 to both sides. Okay, so what that leaves me with is x squared plus 10x equals 24. Okay, so what I did right there is I created a blank. So I created a space for a number. Okay, that I'm going to add in, and that's going to be C. And whatever I add to one side, we know that we have to add to the other. So once I figure out what C is, that's going to go here and over here. So how do we figure out what C is? C is where we take the middle term from our original trinomial B, and we do B over 2 squared. Okay, so in this case, B was 10, so I'm going to do 10 over 2, and I'm going to square that. So 10 over 2 is 5, and so 5 squared would be 25. Okay, so 25 is what I'm going to put in this blank to complete the square. And over here, I put the same 25. Because it's an equation, I have to keep it balanced, so whatever goes on one side, I have to add to the other. Okay, so now I have my perfect square trinomial, or my perfect trinomial square, however you want to say it, of x squared, move this up, plus 10x plus 25 equals 49. Okay, so why did I even do that? Like, why does it matter if my square is complete? It matters because this is a special kind of trinomial that can be factored into a binomial squared. So the way to do that, and we learned this last chapter, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 25 is 5, and then I take this plus sign and I put it in here. So I was able to factor x squared plus 10x plus 25 into x plus 5 squared. Okay, and let's see. In case you're wondering like how that works, sorry, I have like my iPhone like propped up onto a bunch of books. Okay, so x plus 5 and x plus 5. Just like last chapter, okay, I can go like this, and then x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times 5 is 25. So when I combine my like terms, I have x squared from up here. These two together make 10x, and then 25. Okay, so I just factored that perfect square trinomial. Okay, so I factored it into x plus 5 squared, which just means x plus 5 times x plus 5 equals 49. Okay, so the reason this helps us is because now what I'm able to do is I'm able to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and I wrote this little plus minus because we know that the square root of 49 could be positive 49 or it could be negative 49. So when I take the square root of something that's being squared, it's just that number itself. So x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 49. Okay, now we know the square root of 49 is 7. So I can write x plus 5 equals plus or minus 7. Okay, if I didn't know that, it's not a big deal. The next example I'll show you, it won't be a whole number. So I'm really close. I want x by itself, but right now we're adding 5 to it. So I subtract 5, and I get x equals negative 5 plus or minus 7. So this right here is my two answers. I'm going to have to work them out, but it could either be negative 5 plus 7 or negative 5 minus 7. This is just a way to write it, okay, in one expression. So negative 5 plus 7 is 2, or negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. And those would be my two answers, okay? And if we look back, the original, expression, or equation, is x squared plus 10x plus 24, minus 24. Let me rewrite it. I'm writing it down here. X squared plus 10x minus 24 equals 0. So with either one of these numbers, I should be able to plug it in and still get 0. So 2 squared plus 10 times 2 minus 24 equals 0. So that's 4 plus 20 minus 24 is 0, which is true because this is 24 minus 24. So my first solution of 2 works. And I can check it if I wanted to. Okay, with negative 12, that would be negative 12 squared plus 10 times negative 12 minus 24 should equal 0. So negative 12 times negative 12 is 144. And then I do 144 and then minus 120 minus 24. Okay, so let me put up a little bit more. So 144 minus 120 is 24. 24 minus 24 is 0. So that one checks out. So essentially what we just found, okay, is if we were to graph this parabola, okay, which you are not being required to do today, but just to kind of tie it all together with what we've been doing, okay, this parabola, and it's not going to be an accurate drawing, but this parabola would cross at 2 and negative 12. Okay, so I have one more example. Actually, I have 2. So let's do the next one. Okay, so this next one I have is x squared plus 4x minus 13 is 0. Okay, so if you want to pause it and like try it yourself maybe and see if you can get it, that would be great. Okay, so let's do this. X squared plus 4x. Oh, so there's nothing that I can multiply together to make negative 13 that's going to add to give me 4. So I know I'm going to complete the square. I'm going to add 13 to both sides. Okay, so what this left me with, just like last time, is that blank to fill in with c. Okay, and just like last time, to figure out c, it's b over 2 squared. Okay, b is 4, so that's 4 over 2, which is 2. 2 squared is 4. So 4 is going to go in here, and it's going to go on both sides. So my new trinomial, okay, is x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 13 plus 4 is 17. Okay, so now I've created a trinomial square. So the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 4 is 2, because this is a plus sign, this is a plus, and that equals 17. So I'm down to that step where I'm going to take the square root of both sides, okay, and the positive and negative root on the right-hand side. So that leaves me with x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. Okay, I don't know the square root of 17, so I'm not going to try to work that out yet. So what I'm going to do, sorry, I was getting out a calculator, is I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So subtract 2, subtract 2. So what that leaves me with is, move that up, x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 17. Okay, and this is where you can use your calculator. So I'm just going to type in on here, let's see, clear it off. So -2, or 2 negative, I guess, on this one, and then plus the square root of 17 gives me 2.12. Or I can type in, let me clear it, -2 minus the square root of 17 equals -6.12. Okay, and essentially what you could do, and you're not required to do it, but if I plugged in either of these numbers up here into my original, it would give me 0. Okay, and obviously the more decimals you use, the more accurate your answer is going to be. So if you did end up plugging that in and you got like 0.2 or something, that doesn't mean that you're incorrect. It just means that we didn't get the exact answer because we didn't write down all of these decimals. Okay, and one last example. Can you see it? There we go. Okay, so this one is 3x squared minus 12x minus 21 is 0. So what you should notice, hopefully, on this one is that all of these numbers are divisible by 3. Okay, so I want to divide both sides by 3 first. Okay, it's just going to make it easier if this first one is just x squared instead of 3x squared. We'll get into that later, but for today, we just want it to be an x squared. So I divide, and that gives me x squared minus 4x minus 7. 0 divided by 3 is just 0. Okay, so there's nothing I can multiply to make 7 that's going to add -7. That's going to add to give me -4. So I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to add 7. So x squared minus 4x equals 7. And then I've created the blank, okay, for C. Hopefully it's becoming habit now, right? So I'm going to do b over 2 squared. So -4 over 2 is -2. -2 squared is 4. So I put a 4 here and a 4 here. So I've now made my perfect square trinomial. Okay, x squared minus 4x plus 4 is 11. And so the next step is going to be to factor. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 4 is 2. The only thing that's a little different than the last example is that it's going to be a minus equals 11. Okay, so this is the same information, just written in a different way. It's just written in factored form. So I take the square root of both sides. So I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. I don't know the square root of 11. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. So on my calculator, 2 plus the square root of 11 is 5.32. Or 2 minus the square root of 11 equals -1.32. And those would be my two solutions. Okay, so hopefully that cleared up any confusion, or maybe you just needed to see the process one more time. Okay, so remember what we're doing is making sure that you have x squared at the front, at the beginning. Then we want to move the C term, if there is one, to the right side, okay, because we want to make a perfect trinomial over here. Okay, this was not perfect, so we made a perfect trinomial by completing the square. I completed the square by adding in the C, which was b over 2 squared, so I added that in on both sides. Now I could take that perfect trinomial and factor it into x minus 2 squared. Then I take the square root of both sides, and then I solve for x. Okay, so if you have other questions or you need more help on your homework, don't forget, send me an email, okay, and I hope that helps.